Jan is the principal at Pinjarra. Oh, Jan, you'll correct me if I get it wrong. Is it State High School, Senior High School? Senior High School, isn't it? Here we go. Hey, Jan. Jan's got a
Hello,
iPad there. Here we go.
I have
Yeah, so I always just write Pinjarra, and I always forget about the SHS. Is it senior or secondary high school? It's senior high school, yeah?
senior high school.
Yeah. Um, Jan, tell us a little bit about the need you saw for learnership in the school. Like, what drew you to this work?
Okay, so I'm going to start with a little bit of a backstory, and that really is around several years ago now. I was at a WASIA conference in Perth, and James was this shiny-faced new speaker who came along, and I thought, oh, I'll pop into the workshop and see what it's all about. And it was actually something that stuck with me from that moment forward was the discussion that James presented was the fact that there is no such thing as talent. And I walked out of there feeling quite buoyed by the thought that there might be hope for me yet, if that was the case. Um, and I wasn't a principal at that stage, and that notion really resonated with me as a parent and as an educator. And so it wasn't until several years later that I really had the opportunity to re-engage with James and the work that he does. And that's because I took up the principalship here at Pinjarra Senior High School. And in the first year, I sort of just, like a good poker player, watched the game and the players and saw how things worked. And in the second year, really set about an improvement journey. And at the heart of that was our involvement in an innovation and enterprise project that challenged us to think about schooling and the experience of schooling that our children have in our system. So I guess in that journey around looking at what's going on and what do we do to improve it, it brought me back to the work that James does, and certainly our relationship, moving forward was born out of some thinking attached to that. Part of that work was to address a compelling case for change, to think about what we do with what's going on. And what was going on, by my observation here, not just in the school but across our system, is that there's increasing student disengagement. We had poor retention of our kids through to the end of year 12. But the resounding factor that was specific to Pinjarra for me was just this entrenched sense of no aspiration among not just our students, but also their parents. We had a great team working hard. The achievement data was okay. The school was ticking along quite nicely, but it was just not lighting up our young people in the way that it should. And it really kind of, I guess, made me sad that even among our most capable students, there was a distinct sense of them being uninspired about learning, uninspired about future opportunity, and passively viewing their education as something that kind of happens to them, that they just go along with it until it's over. The alternate to that was, of course, kids opting out or, in fact, arcing up and finding themselves, labelled as challenging or disengaged. Now, on reflection, as we got into the work, it really occurred to me that there was some serious thinking to do about fixed mindsets in that space, because that was fundamentally what was wrong with my school and community, was that they were really locked into a very fixed sense of self and what they could hope for out of their education and, in fact, their lives. So that led to us questioning ourselves and asking some really hard questions about the purpose and relevance of education. And then it also led us to even more tricky and challenging questions about being honest about our students and how they experience the schooling that we provide for them. It hasn't changed much in 100 years. Our school had our centenary in 2021, and I don't think in that 100 years a lot had changed about the way that kids come and go from this place. So really, questioning ourselves wasn't enough. We then decided we needed to question our kids, because straight from the horse's mouth was going to give us the best evidence we could possibly work from. So we engaged in some ethnographic surveying, and we asked our students, and all types of students, younger, older, kids from really disengaged, disenfranchised backgrounds through to our top academic students, kids from different ethnicities, etc., etc. And there were three consistent threads that came out of that for us. The first one was that being good at school mattered to every single child. Success was important. The second one was that they wanted school to be connected and relevant and meaningful in the world outside our gates. They needed it to be useful. And the final thing was that they wanted a trusted adult in their life, in their school life, that they could go to for help and advice and guidance, but who didn't tell them what to do. because when they were told what to do, it made them feel stupid. And it really entrenched that sense of being the kid who had to ask the question or not know how to ask the question, or even if there was a question to be asked. So we use that feedback from our students as key drivers in building our case for change, and in fact reimagining our school to be far more capable and competent in delivering the kind of educational experience that our kids need to be good as 21st century learners. So we set about the work, and there were three things we absolutely had to do. The first one was to shift our thinking from being reactive to proactive. The second one was that we needed to shift our focus from being obsessed with how we teach to how kids learn, and being open to the fact that we're not always right in the way that we go about setting up our classrooms. And I think the last one, and attached to that is that notion we had to create some skin in the game for our students. They had to become centralised stakeholders and accountable for their own learning in some way. And the last one was innovating our pedagogy to actually give them some real world skills that they would have lifelong. So we drew on the enterprise skill set of problem solving, creativity, communication, collaboration, partnership, teamwork, intercultural learning, those sorts of things as underpinning principles of our instructional models. Now, it sounds like we've made great progress in that space. All we did was think about, so what do we do? These were the things we realised that we needed to do. The second part of the thinking attached to that was, geez, we're really going to have to change our mindset. It's not just the kids who are fixed, it's us too. So we set up in our school professional learning communities that were entirely based on action research. The whole point of it wasn't what they action researched, it was the fact they got into the learning zone often and that they had to stick with it even when it was hard, in a pretty risk-free environment for our teachers, because they were test driving ideas in their classrooms in spaces that were familiar and safe for them. I guess the book and the work that's come out of Learnership is really exciting from our perspective, because while we've touched in bits of it, and I feel like I'm sort of suggesting that we've made it through the storm and that we're absolutely embedding and normalising, we're absolutely not. I don't think there'll ever be a point at which we're done and I'm satisfied. But it's given us we had a blueprint, and this has given us the roadmap. It's really given us an opportunity to be instructed about how to do the work, not just what to do, but how to do it. And over the 4 years, we have shifted our perspectives. We've impacted our practice quite a lot. We've learned about the mindset continuum. We've learned about the learnership matrix, but now we also have got some idea of how to nudge our students and ourselves towards being the educational experience that we want. It's about growth. We've got a long way to go. As I said, we've had 4 or so years with James. Now I think, James, it's about that long that we've been plaguing you with great questions. Yeah. But
you're doing great work.
We're working on it, but it's very much a work in progress. And I think that the book will help us to do the work we need to do, and going back and picking up the folks who haven't been on the journey from the beginning, but also stretching those of us who have into the next levels of where we need to go and what we need to do to keep on embedding and normalising the idea that learning is about learners, and teaching is about the facilitation of environments and contexts and scripts and conversations and relationships that can make it work. So the book is really exciting for us, James. It gives me, rather than having to spend hours talking to people and, trying to ignite the fuse myself, it gives me an opportunity for them to have a direct conduit to you to be able to do that. So thank you for the book. Thank you for being on our journey and informing our journey. And we've still got some work to do, obviously, going forward.
Thanks very much, Jan. And just as perhaps we probably should do this for Jan. There we go. Thanks for the work you're doing. Just as Jane sort of switches things over, and I'll invite Carl up, I'll just hit on a few points that you made. The idea that, one, we're switching the focus from the teaching to the learning. I think that's key in the idea of learnership. And the other one, the way you started, the idea that, that low aspirations, these kids that don't see a chance for themselves in the future, that aren't setting goals for themselves, that are saying, well, I can only get as good as my parents, or they don't see a way out. And that's been a driving thread through the book, that we need to develop students who have agency, who feel powerful,
Absolutely.
not powerless in the world, that feel like the master of their circumstances, not the victim of their circumstances. And I think the idea that you focused on a few times there, that it's about growth. It's about improvement and seeing the change. So thank you for the work you're doing. I'll hand over to another school principal who you haven't met yet, but you should, Carl Allen. Now, Carl